Next, we have a special keynote presentation prepared by the best-selling author of The Blockchain Revolution and executive chairman of the Blockchain Research Institute.
Please welcome Don Tapscott for his presentation and Helen for the later fireside chat.
Well, thanks very much, and I'm delighted to be here, as it were, today. The Blockchain Research Institute has a great relationship with Binance, and in fact, I'm the honorary dean of the Binance Blockchain Institute in China as well. And I know that power corrupts and PowerPoint corrupts absolutely, but I would like to put a deck up on the screen and take you through a few big ideas having to do with the current situation around the global pandemic. First of all, I'll just say a word about where I am right now. I'm in Canada, and I've been with my extended family up here in our lake house for a while. If you're going to be stuck somewhere, I guess this is a pretty good place to be stuck. But the pandemic has created a truly extraordinary situation in the world. The economic costs are staggering, the human costs are incalculable, and it's causing us to re-examine many of our leaders, institutions, and even systems. And hopefully there will be some good and some change that comes about from this. The pandemic has a lot to do with data or lack of it. Our supply chains have failed us terribly. How can it be that we can't get a paper mask to a frontline worker? And there are many, many other challenges that fortunately are addressed by this new generation of blockchain technology. So let me start by just giving you a little personal history on this and how I came to this conclusion. Some of you may know, I wrote a couple of books in the 1980s that nobody read. I think my mother bought most of the copies. And I was asked 20 years, I finally wrote bestsellers in the 90s, The Paradigm Shift in 1993, which was obviously a big book, and The Digital Economy in 1994. It was the first bestseller about the web. And 20 years later, I was asked to write the anniversary edition of The Digital Economy. And I had to reflect on what's happened. And it occurred to me that we've gone from a first era of the digital age with mainframes, mini computers, PCs, the internet, the web, social media, the cloud, big data, and that we're entering a second era where we have technology that learns to do things that it wasn't programmed to do. Technology infusing itself into the physical world, billions and trillions of inert objects have become smart communicating devices, soon not just communicating, but doing transactions, and other extraordinary technologies. And I came to the conclusion that the foundational technology for all of this second era was in fact blockchain. And to us, it represents the second era of the internet. And this is important on when we think about public health. What is blockchain and what does it represent? You see, for 40 years, we've had an internet of information. But when I send you some information, a PDF of this deck, an email, photograph, I'm actually not sending you the information. I'm sending you a copy. And that works great for information. But when it comes to assets, the things that really matter, in our economies and in our society, things like money or security, stocks, bonds, contracts, deeds, um, uh, land titles, uh, assets representing energy or the data in our identities, or other assets like art or music. When it comes to assets, sending a copy is a bad idea. You don't want someone copying your identity or your vote. And if I send you $1,000, it's really important that I don't still have the money, right? So for for decades or years, cryptographers have called this the double spend problem. And the way that we manage this problem in our economy is through intermediaries, banks, governments, um, transfer agents, escrow agents, stock exchanges, social media companies, and others perform all of the business and transaction logic for every type of commerce. They identify the assets, they identify the parties, they clear and settle transactions, and overall they've done a good job, but there are growing problems. The last panel referred to some of these. I mean, they exclude a couple of billion people from the global economy. They slow things down. You talked about remittances. Why does it take 4 to 7 days from money sent from a doctor in Toronto to his mother in Shanghai? And why is he charged 10 to 20% for that? They capture our data, and that means that we can't use the data to plan our lives. We can't monetize the data, and our privacy is being undermined. And overall, they're centralized systems. That means that they can be hacked. There are two types of these systems that these things run on, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. So what if there were not just an internet of information? What if there were an internet of value, some kind of vast global distributed ledger where anything of value from money to securities to music could be managed, stored, transacted in a secure and private way? That's what Satoshi cracked. In 2008, he wrote this paper that broke the double spend problem. And it was the biggest innovation in computer science in a generation to me. And for the first time ever in human history, people can manage and store and transact with value, with assets, peer to peer. And trust is not achieved by an intermediary, it's achieved by cryptography and collaboration and some clever code, which is why we call it the trust protocol. Trust is native to the medium. Internet of information going to an internet of value. Now, I've said that this is more secure. I had a great analogy, I thought, for explaining that. But on late night American television, there's a very popular show with a guy named John Oliver, and he did a whole show on blockchain where he had some fun with my analogy. So I'm going to show that to you now.
Complicated process the network uses to verify records. It is very secure. Now, relax. I'm not going to get into what that process is or how it works, but I will share a really helpful, really dumb metaphor for why it is safe.
The way I like to think of it is that a blockchain is a highly processed thing, sort of like a chicken McNugget. And if you wanted to hack it, it'd be like turning a chicken McNugget back into a chicken. Now, someday someone will be able to do that, but for now, it's going to be tough.
Hold on. That is an absolutely horrible thought. So why is that reporter so happy about the idea? Because if anyone ever figures out how to turn a chicken McNugget back into a chicken, that chicken is going to be up. He's going to spend the rest of his life suffering from PTSD and writing haunting poetry about the experience. The things I saw, buck, buckaw. My body is whole, but what of my soul?
My body is whole, but what of my soul? Anyway, you can see why I don't use the analogy anymore. I still think it's a good analogy. So 5 years ago, I got lucky with the timing on this book and with my co-author. Did become the big bestseller on blockchain. The publisher says it sold more copies than all other books on the topic combined. And it's now in 20 languages, including in short form and long form Chinese. I also got lucky with my co-author, who turns out is my son, who turns out is brilliant. And he's a better writer than I am. So based on that, we created the Blockchain Research Institute. And this gets us into public health because we're investigating 110 projects on opportunities and strategies in many industries, and creating close to 400 deliverables for our clients. These are some of the largest companies in the world and governments that are transitioning to enterprise blockchain. And one of the topics is blockchain for good. And there are all kinds of opportunities here, of course, that we can use blockchain for financial inclusion to instantly bring these people into the global economy. 70% of the land titles in the world are not enforceable, and blockchain can solve that problem. You mentioned remittances. Western Union shouldn't be charging 10 to 20% to send money from one country to another. There are many, many other opportunities. So what I'm going to talk about today is public health. Now, each of these is a 1 hour speech, and I'd be happy to spend 8 hours here if you'd like, but I think we'll just focus on public health. The pandemic. Well, there are a lot of different players involved here. We have the manufacturers of things like ventilators. There are the wholesalers that sell this stuff as part of a supply chain. Pharmacies have deal with patients and try and avoid drug interactions and medical records. Medical facilities are brimming with all this technology that needs to communicate and share information, and insurance companies are having a tough time. So let's focus in on a few of the subtopics here. First of all, supply chain. Our supply chains have failed us. We have hoarding for things as simple as toilet paper. And how do you know that a ventilator is a valid ventilator that comes from a certified facility? Well, blockchain will become the new supply chain. You think about it. This is a $50 trillion business that's about to be transformed. And in a supply chain, it's a complicated thing. If you have it, whatever it is, it came from a supply chain. And you've got trains and boats and planes and trucks and all kinds of various manufacturers and sub manufacturers and all kinds of borders and tax authorities and escrow agents and information is flying around using traditional EDI and ERP systems. And you got faxes and email and paper. One of our colleagues at FedEx, an executive, said that the reason often that they know what's in a railway car is there's a piece of paper inside the car when you open the door up in a little envelope. Now, all of this is moving around. There are delays, there are lawyers, there are errors everywhere. Imagine if all of that were a shared network state, a single version of the truth, real-time transactions. There would be no payment and settlement delay of 2 to 3 days because the payment and the settlement is the same activity. It's just a change to the ledger. So this is a huge opportunity to create just-in-time supply chain solutions. And there are a number of opportunities that we've explored here in our research on blockchain and pandemics. First of all, we can better track the procuring of medical supplies. And there certainly would be no such thing as hoarding, because overall, why do people hoard? Well, they hoard because they have fear and lack of transparency in a supply chain. But you're not going to buy 3 years of toilet paper if you know that the supply chain is perfectly capable of delivering toilet paper to you. Now that's toilet paper, and the same is true overall for medical supplies. You can know the authenticity of these various medical assets. We can transform logistics, transport, and custody. You know, I was on stage with Fred Smith, who's the CEO, pretty much the founder of FedEx. And this was the opening session of Consensus a couple of years ago in New York. There were like 4,000 people in the audience. It's a little confusing because there were 4,000 people trying to get in the room anyway. But he said to me, we at FedEx reinvented the whole concept of the chain of custody. And now we want to do it again around blockchain. And we're going to know a lot more about where something is. We're going to know how it is and when it is and what's in it and so on. And then we have all kinds of opportunities for blockchain and additive manufacturing on medical supplies as well. So there's a company called Moog, like the Moog synthesizer, not the same guy. It's actually his brother. And they create precision aircraft parts. And what they've done is they used to manufacture a part and then ship it out to, say, Boeing or Airbus. Now they 3D print the part right in the Boeing's factory, and they use blockchain to be able to handle all of this. They've now moved into medical supplies and can 3D print medical supplies on site. So there are huge opportunities having to do with supply chains. I'm very pleased to announce that I've produced a new book here with my colleagues at the Blockchain Research Institute on the supply chain revolution. I just noticed on Amazon.com, it's now shipping, and it's the #1 new release in the commerce category on Amazon. So we're very pleased. Do pick up a copy. All right, the second problem has to do with health data. And this is a broader problem that we have in society about data, that our data is created by us. And the virtual you may know more about you than you do. The virtual you, you don't know where you were a year ago, or what you spent, or what you said, or what diagnosis you had, or what medication you took, or what you took, or what your temperature was, or whether or not you were coughing, or what you got on a test. Dozens of categories of data. You create this data, but it's captured by other institutions, banks, social insurance companies, governments, social media companies, and even in by big medical providers. And it means that you can't use the data to plan your life. But the bigger problem in a pandemic means that all these data are in silos. And so we can't aggregate this data to understand something. And imagine if we had a self-sovereign health record on a blockchain. It's in a black box and it moves around with you, and it's part of your self-sovereign identity. So the state in a crisis like this could mandate the availability of civilian data and critical health information. It could be anonymized. You don't necessarily have to have personal identifiers with that data, but maybe if the crisis is terrible, as it is in many countries now, you actually want to know about individual people and that they're moving around. But even then, you don't need to identify the person. You just need to know that this person is authorized to enter this facility, or this person is authorized to be able to, to perform a certain medical procedure or something like that. But you could have this anonymized data for epidemiologists and so on. But civilians could control their digital identities to provide pertinent health information. So you walk into a hospital and you reveal all of your medical information, regardless of where you are. And then we could have incentive systems to make our individual healthcare data available to appropriate clinicians and government planners. And the data could represent an entire population. So think about it. We've all got devices that are tracking our heart rate, and soon it could be our temperature, whether or not we're coughing or something like that. This data could be captured by our health record that sweeps up all this transactional and other data, health data, as we move along through societies. And the day that there's something out of order in a country, there seems to be a growth in people with certain kinds of temperatures and certain kinds of conditions and symptoms in a certain part. We could get all over it, have early warning systems to be able to stop it. And then, of course, once you're immunized, you've had a vaccination, or perhaps you have antibodies and they're shown to be effective, you could have a health certification attached to an individual's digital identity. This could solve the big problems. We could have our cake and eat it too. We can have the data that we need to have good health, but on the other hand, we can protect our privacy and rights as citizens. Now, how do we get the population to do the right thing, to behave properly in a situation like this? Well, there are two approaches, basically. One is you have the state force it, and that's happening in lots of places, including in Canada. It's inappropriate. You enter a public building in Canada, you got to wear a mask. That's the law, and sometimes that makes sense. But there's another thing that we can build into these systems, that people do the right thing. They act with integrity. and they take care of themselves and others. You know, integrity is the foundation of trust, and integrity is about doing the right thing. It's about being considerate of the interests of the other party and abiding by your commitments. So we could tokenize all kinds of value to create incentives for good behavior. I'm involved in a company right now called carbonx.ca, where we're tokenizing carbon credits. And the goal is to change the behavior of billions of people in the world to attack the climate change problem. How do we get the right skills and talent into medical facilities? Well, it turns out that blockchain is critical for that too, around licensing and staffing, licensing of issuing medical certifications on a blockchain, and staffing, deploying the global, building a medical talent marketplace. And in our work, which is now available to all of you on this topic, we show how a global marketplace for medical talent can be created. And the final one is, how do we sustain the economy in a pandemic, and how do we come out of this? What happens when this blows over? And hopefully it will. Well, there are lots of things that can be done, but one of them is that we need digital cash. It turns out that money, cash, is not just the basis of organized crime, the drug industry, tax evasion, and all kinds of other problems. Cash is dirty and it carries viruses. Now, there are three types of these cash. There's self-organizing digital cash like Bitcoin. There's corporate digital cash or money like Facebook's Libra. And if Facebook can get away with Libra, and that's a big if, they'll roll that out across 2 billion people and they'll become the largest bank in the world by an order of magnitude. And then there's state-based cash as well, central bank digital currencies. And this is happening today. Money is becoming digital, not like we have today with Visa or WePay or any of these things. That's not digital money. Those are computer systems that represent money. This is actual money. And China, of course, is one of the leaders here. I was in China. Last time I was in China, it was a huge event. I was introduced by the vice chairman of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, and he gave greetings from Xi Jinping, who talked about the importance of blockchain and AI as two critical technologies to move forward. And China moving forward with its central bank digital currency would immediately cause a lot of disruption in the world. One of the things it would do is they would roll that out across One Belt, One Road into Africa, Southeast Asia, and it would threaten the supremacy of the dollar as the currency of record. It's an article by my co-author, Alex Tapscott, talking about this topic. So Mark Carney is proposing, former head of the Bank of England, is proposing a global digital currency called he refers to it as a synthetic hegemonic digital currency, where all of these national currencies like the digital dollar and the digital pound and the digital euro and the yen, the RMB, and so on, would be rolled up into this synthetic currency. This topic is explored in some length in a new book by my co-author, Alex Tapscott. It's called The Financial Services Revolution. This is a gorgeous book, and he's written the first major section of this book. And if the top of your head doesn't explode when you read this, I'll be surprised. But it's a very profound look at this coming battle for money that's happening in the world and what that means. So that's the first thing we can do, is move towards digital cash. There are all kinds of other things as well. Supply chain finance is a huge opportunity where we start to, and trade finance as well is pretty much moving to a blockchain with all of our major clients. We're doing a lot of work on the topic of insurance and risk management. There are huge opportunities here. And of course, blockchain is leading to the transformation of the deep structure and architecture of the firm. Companies are going to become more decentralized and more distributed. And this is a good thing because companies that embrace this technology are higher performance, they have lower costs, they're able to create better value for customers. And that's why we're very focused on the enterprise space, because this is the new operating system for the enterprise of the future. So to the extent that an economy embraces this technology, they'll do well. So these are 5 areas where blockchain can help in a pandemic. And they're a subset of the work that we're doing on blockchain and public health. Um, you can go to blockchainresearchinstitute.com. And also, I'm pleased to say that this report on blockchain and pandemics, a very significant report. We not only made that available to the public, but we granted rights to Binance to translate this report into Chinese, and they're making it available across China. And it's our intention that people around the world will read this report so that we can help stop this pandemic now, because it's just getting started in some places like the United States. We're not in a second wave in the United States, we're just starting. But also that we can prevent these things with early warning systems in the future. Let me close with a couple of thoughts, then I look forward to a conversation with Helen. There are some challenges. Some areas this is moving very quickly, other areas a little more slowly. And there's a reason for that, is that with the Internet of Information, you just put up a website, 24 hours, you're in business. With the Internet of Value, we're talking about transforming a $50 trillion supply chain industry, transforming the financial industry. It's a multi-$100 trillion industry around the world. This is the biggest transformation of assets from physical to digital. That's what crypto represents. We're digitizing the assets of the world. And this is going to take a while for this to occur. There are big problems with scalability and interoperability, and companies like Binance, of course, are working hard on solving these problems. And there are exciting new platforms like Cosmos, the Internet of Blockchains, powerful technology. We've got even traditional permission systems like Hyperledger have embraced Besu and are launching initiatives to try and get integration. And interoperability is important because it means that there can also be scalability as blockchains interoperate. Blockchain has an image problem, and we're spending a lot of time working on that. Some of it's false. I mean, the association of blockchain with criminals and of crypto with criminals is really not a valid one. Criminals are always the first to adopt exciting new technologies, from the automobile to the flip phone. But and sure, maybe up to 1% of Bitcoin transactions are used for nefarious purposes, but we estimate over 3% of cash is used by criminals. And in fact, law enforcement loves crypto, real smart ones, because if you and I do a transaction, that's anonymous. But of course, there's proper KYC and AML that needs to be done for the transaction, but it's anonymous. But there's metadata that can help law enforcement agencies. And then the other one is that we have a big problem with our regulation environments. In most countries, we have this whole set of regulatory structures that exist for an old world of assets and an old world of finance. And this is hurting companies, and it's hurting economies all around the world. And we're working hard with regulators globally to try and fix this problem. You know, you have legacy attitudes about things. I mean, Jamie Dimon said Bitcoin's a fraud. He subsequently changed his point of view on that, as he realized they're doing a lot with Bitcoin. But, leaders of old paradigms have great difficulty embracing the new. I'm old enough to remember Ken Olsen, the CEO of Digital Equipment Corporation, which is almost the largest computer company in the world in the 1970s. He said in 1977, there's no reason for any individual to have a computer in his home. Well, famous last words, and the company's now gone. So let me speak to you in closing about leadership. Paradigm shifts involve dislocation, conflict. This is a new paradigm, a new mental model. And they put boundaries around things. They constrain our actions. They're often based on assumptions that are so strong, we don't know that they're there. And new paradigms are received with coolness, even mockery or hostility. And vested interests fight against change. So, how are we going to find the leadership for change? Well, everyone has a role. And of course, those of you who are attending this wonderful third anniversary of Binance have self-selected as companies who have something to say. At the Blockchain Research Institute, this is our goal, to make this technology mainstream globally and to help companies that want to do that succeed. There's a big potential and there's a gap between deployment, and that's our role, is to fill that. I wanted to tell you about a couple of the big things that we're doing. We have the world's largest courses on blockchain, and they're on Coursera, the largest provider of online education, at least in the English language, and through INSEAD, one of the top 2 or 3 business schools in the world, often #1, according to the FT. And you can get a 25% off these courses. We spent almost $1 million developing them by going to coursera.org/promo/blockchain revolution. I'll give you a second to take a picture of that screen. Go there and register. And I'm very proud of these courses. We're also holding the biggest events in the world on blockchain in the enterprise. And our hybrid event, which will be online, but also a physical event, will be occurring in Toronto, October 29th and 30th. And this will look a lot like a TV show, highly produced. And we sort of proved that we can do this last week, when on July 7th, we created the Enterprise Blockchain Awards. And we did this with hologram technology. And we beamed the presenters onto a beautiful multi-million-dollar stage, which is actually a digital stage. And it's just an example of how we can do stuff in this new environment. And we're determined to change the world here at the BRI. And we're out around speaking in front of the largest audiences in the world, and we'll be doing that again starting up in the fall and next year. Some of these are huge. This was 29,000 people. I was the opening speaker. Barack Obama was the closer. So let me just end with a thought. Can you do this? Can we transform public health for the better? Well, my view is the future is not something to be predicted. The future is something to be achieved. And we can achieve a different future if we want. To close, I'd like to use an analogy. At the BRI, we've been studying nature to learn more about distributed systems. And fish come in schools, bees come in swarms. Starlings over the moors of England come in something called a murmuration. And the murmuration is a word in the dictionary. Starlings are out over a 30-kilometer radius during the day, and at night, they create one of the most extraordinary things in all of nature. And the murmuration has a function. It warms the birds up for the cold night ahead, and it protects the birds from predators. On the right of the screen here, you can see a predator, a hawk, 25 times the size of a starling, being chased away by the collective power of the little birds. Scientists that have studied this say they've never seen an accident. And there's leadership, but there's no one leader. And when the moment is right, magic happens. Now, is this some kind of fanciful analogy, or could we learn something from it? Well, the murmuration functions according to the principles of the trust protocol. And it's the implicit principles in what I've told you today. It's a giant collaboration. Remember, I said trust is not achieved by a middleman. It's achieved by collaboration, cryptography, and code. There's code in the DNA of the birds that gives it rules. A big rule is don't get too far away, but another rule is don't bump into anybody else. And the murmuration also has a great interdependence. If I'm speaking to a CEO audience, I say that business can't succeed in a world that's failing. And the murmuration functions as if the interests of the individual birds are connected to the murmuration as a whole. And overall, the murmuration has a great integrity. And integrity is really the foundation of trust, because trust is the expectation that the other party will do the right thing. Trust is the expectation that the other party will act with integrity.
Some things for us to take away. And now I'd like to introduce Helen Hai, head of Binance Charity, who will be joining Dawn for a fireside chat on pandemics, public health, and the blockchain revolution.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Helen. I'm sorry. It seems that I got cut off, so, but I am here.
So Don, what a brilliant presentation. It's a great honor actually to have this fair chat with you. Let me ask you a question. Can you name top 3 industries that blockchain will transform? And can you give us concrete examples in those top 3 industries from your knowledge?
Well, the first one that people normally think of, and it's fair enough, is the financial services industry. And and as I said, this is a multi-hundred-trillion-dollar industry, and assets are becoming digitized. So there are various parts of that industry that are already dominated by blockchain. You have companies like Gartner Group who say, well, blockchain is not really a big deal. It's just going to be an add-on to ERP or CRM, but they're wrong. So in the financial services industry, trade finance, for example, is basically moving to blockchain. One Belt, One Road, the largest supply chain in the world, the trade finance on that platform is done through blockchain technology. We've got venture capital. In the book 5 years ago, we said that venture capital will be disrupted in a decade. Venture capital was disrupted 2 years ago, where you have token generation events that have raised tens of billions of dollars and that have given people outside of the traditional financial power structure the ability to raise money for entrepreneurs. We're working with insurance companies that are embracing blockchain for all kinds of things because you can know the provenance of assets. So that industry is being changed profoundly. I focused on health today, Helen, because I think that this is a big one as well. that it could be the killer app for blockchain because we all care about our health, and we have the irresistible force of pressures to control healthcare costs, meeting up with the immovable object of public expectations that our healthcare should be better, not worse, that we should have better ability to fight pandemics and so on. And in organizations like here in Canada, Toronto, the University Health Network is using blockchain for patient records, initially to enable patients to be able to give permission to researchers to use their health data under certain conditions, but the control remains with the patient. And then beyond that, it's really hard to say. The blockchain oil and gas consortium, representing all the big oil companies in the Western world, has just joined the Blockchain Research Institute. And one of their CEOs told me recently that they believe blockchain is ready for prime time in upstream oil and gas. This is the reinvention of one of the most important industries in our economy. So it's just not true that nothing's happening.
Fantastic. And Don, all you said, we actually love the government to hear, because actually today the government still holding a lot of powers, in the world we are still in. So can you tell us, in your opinion, if people really interested in blockchain and crypto, where are the leading countries and in the regions, in the world of blockchain innovation, where would they come to?
Well, this is a really important issue. Think about it, that if the Internet of Information was based in Silicon Valley, where's the Internet of Value going to be based? Now, it won't just be one location, but if you can build a big blockchain ecosystem in a city or region, this is called jobs, innovation, economic development, capital flowing into that area. It's called tax revenue, social stability, and so on. So the stakes are very, very high here. And it's not going to be Silicon Valley because leaders of old paradigms have difficulty embracing the new. So at the Blockchain Research Institute, we actually track the top 15 cities. And I'll tell you that China has 5 of them.
Wow.
And I think it has to do with, you're the only country in the world that has a head of state who's saying this is critical technology for our future. Now, it doesn't mean everything is perfect in China, and there's much to be done. But we're working with Hainan, that has just created been granted by the federal government to be the global the Chinese Center for Blockchain pilots. You've got Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, obviously, Hangzhou, Guangzhou. These are all areas that there's a lot going on. Now, there are other important areas that are surprising. Switzerland, because in Zug and now in Geneva, the government regulatory environment encourages this kind of stuff to occur. And in Europe, there are important developments now in Berlin, activities starting to be a big deal in Paris. And in North America, Toronto and New York are 2 huge centers.
Fantastic. And Don, actually, we are very thrilled you joined force with Binance and also become the chairman of the China Blockchain Academy. And clearly, we intend to facilitate and provide government and enterprise education in blockchain. What are the user cases for government? And what are you foreseeing coming up?
Well, one of the biggest users will be government. And 1993, a book came out called Reinventing Government that called for better, cheaper government. In 1995, Al Gore in the US wrote this big paper called Reinventing Government, and the internet was supposed to transform government. I don't think it did. A lot of governments just use the Internet of Information to automate existing government processes. But now we have an Internet of values that deals with assets. Governments have the biggest supply chains in the world. In some countries, the state runs all kinds of important things in the economy, like healthcare. We've got transportation and logistics, all that will be transformed by blockchain. And then, of course, a really big one, Helen, that I mentioned is central bank digital currencies. The countries that move most quickly on this will get huge benefits. They'll give central bankers the ability to manage the economy much better. You put money into the money supply, you can see what happens to it. Are people investing? Are they saving? Are they spending more? You know, you have a crisis like today. The United States is having a terrible time making payments to citizens. Um, the Canadian government spent $1 billion just trying to develop a payment system for its own employees, and the whole thing failed. Well, how do you pay an entire population? With blockchain, you could helicopter drop emergency funds onto the mobile devices of an entire population. So governments could have a lighter touch on regulation with central bank digital currencies and so on. And this is the huge topic for us, and it's our work is being led by Alex Tapscott, who's one of the world's leaders in this area. And if people go to Blockchain Research Institute, they can learn more about this. And hopefully soon, they'll learn more about it through the Binance Blockchain Academy too, as our partnership grows.
That's fantastic. Don, Steve Jobs once said, innovation distinguish leaders and followers. Right now at Binance, we believe we're actually leaders and shapers of the industry in the fronting line, drive the technology, looking for application. So what kind of advice you would give actually to all of us and also our product team, our tech team? What kind of things we can support blockchain to be more fruitful? I mean, how we can overcome some of what's the key bottlenecks we should actually challenge right now?
Well, I'd like to, that sounds like a consulting assignment. No, I know Binance pretty well. And of course I use it, have always used it. This is an extraordinary company. When you announced you're having your 3rd year anniversary, I was like, 3 years? Is that all it's been? And you have this huge juggernaut powerhouse that dominates a certain part of this market. But my view, of course, is that you've created a platform and a skill set to be able to provide leadership in many, many other areas in the world. I know you've used a term that I think is a good one, that in some ways you could be the sort of Amazon of the Internet of Value. You could be helping enterprises, because our big enterprises need help. They need the kind of engineering skills and sophistication to be able to transform their businesses. And Helen, I know you run Binance Charity. Binance could be a leader in blockchain for good, in helping solve many of these huge problems, from climate change, land titles, financial inclusion, discrimination, conflict. All kinds of big problems can be solved through blockchain. And that can not only do good in the world, but Binance could do well by doing good, in that this could be of enormous commercial value to the company. So you're at one of those turning points, really. You know, do you want to, your little jewelry company, do you want to become the Louis Vuitton global conglomerate that deals with all kinds of upscale items? Would be an analogy. And I think that there's no reason that Binance can't do that if you will it.